What do you call a political movement that screams fascism like every 5 minutes, swears democracy is on its last breath, and then paints Donald Trump as a cross between Voldemort and Darth Vader? But then melts like butter the actual moment that they need something from him. Like, what do you call that? I will tell you what you call it. You are looking at a party with no convictions and no consistency. Democrats, they always make the most exaggerated, inflammatory, apocalyptic statements that you've ever heard. But the moment you press them on the specifics, suddenly it's, well, it's complicated. Well, I didn't really mean it like that. Or, well, what had happened was, but here's the truth. The rhetoric, you guys from the Democrats, it's just reckless. Their claims are hollow, and their political theater has half of the country in therapy for Trump derangement syndrome, which is a condition that they manufactured with their own hysteria. By the way, there is a psychologist up in New York who's been receiving threats from people who are suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. But anyway, listen, you cannot spend 8 years telling people that the sky is falling and then sit in the Oval Office grinning like you on a field trip to Disneyland. Like, those two things don't go together. But yet, that is exactly what New York City's new socialist mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani, that's what he just did. So today, we're going to break down the Meet the Press interview, and I'm going to expose why Zohran Mamdani is either one of two things. He's either a liar and a snake's oil salesman, or he is a very smart man who is smart enough to know his ideas will never work, but he's also dumb enough to keep selling them because, they help Democrats win elections. So either way, New Yorkers are about to find out the hard way. So let's get into this. Grace and peace, you guys. Welcome back to Unshakable with April Chapman, where we discuss all things social, cultural, political, and theological from a biblical perspective. I'm your host, April Chapman, and welcome to today's show. So the first thing I need to do is I want to set the stage for the Socialist mayor and Donald Trump showdown. We've got a lot of ground to cover today, so let me just go ahead and set this up. So New York City is the largest city in America. It is essentially the cultural nerve center of the world. And they've just elected Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani as their mayor. Now, Zohran goes to the White House, not because Trump invited him, but he's like, no, I'm going to go to the White House. And he sits down with Donald Trump, and we get this weird political Frankenstein moment. Trump is praising him as someone with the same ideas or similar ideas, saying, there's a lot that we agree upon. And I'm like, okay, it's kind of strange, but okay, let's go with it. Then Mamdani is smiling and he's talking about affordability. Like, that is like his key buzzword. Affordability, affordability, affordability. But then in the same interview, this man calls Donald Trump a fascist and a threat to democracy while openly admitting that he still wants and needs Trump's help. So here's the thesis of this episode, and I don't want you guys to miss any of this. Either Zohran Mamdani is a liar who will say one thing to Trump and another thing to his base, or he knows full well that his socialist wish list is never going to work. But he uses it because it's useful to manipulate voters and to keep Democrats in power. So he's figuring out it's going to win one way or the other. So we're going to walk through several key moments from his Meet the Press interview, and I'm just going to expose the whole game.
So, Mr. Mayor-elect, just to be very clear, do you think that President Trump is a fascist?
And after President Trump said that, I said yes. And
so you do?
And that's something that I've said in the past. I say it today. And I think what I appreciated about the conversation that I had with the president was that we were not shy about the places of disagreement, about the politics that has brought us to this moment. And we also wanted to focus on what it could look like to deliver on a shared analysis of an affordability crisis for New Yorkers.
You've also said in the past that President Trump has engaged in a, quote, attack on our democracy. You've called him a despot. Do you still believe President Trump is a threat to the democracy?
Everything that I've said in the past, I continue to believe. And that's the thing that I think is important in our politics, is that we don't shy away from where we have disagreements, but we understand what it is that brings us to that table. Because I'm not coming into the Oval Office to make a point or make a stand. I'm coming in there to deliver for New Yorkers. And a few weeks ago, I was asked by a reporter 3 words to describe myself. I said, New York City. And that's what animated that conversation. How do we deliver for the people of New York City?
So here Mamdani is confirming that he still believes Donald Trump is a fascist and he's a threat. But then he's praising the productive conversation that he had. So I'm like, okay, let me just get this straight. You meet a man that you publicly call a fascist. They love using that word, but I've yet to see any of them define it, but that's neither here nor there. Then you go on to say that he's attacking democracy, whatever the heck that means. You say he's a despot. You say all of that on record. Like, we can go back and play the tape and hear you say it. But then you go into the Oval Office like, hey, fascists, can you help my city with affordability? And I get it. Listen, trust me, I get it. There's always going to be some form of transactional politics, right? So to be a good politician, you have to be able to get what you want from people who would normally not give it to you. That's what makes a good politician. However, at the same time, you have no moral courage if you cannot explain why all of a sudden, all of the things that you previously said about a person are either no longer true, or why you believed them at one point to be true and why you said them. Like, if you can't explain what changed, then I have no choice than to label what you were doing performative outrage. Hear me clearly. We have plenty of examples of individuals who are on the right who used to be, they were not Team Trump. I mean, you've got our vice president, right, was not a Trump guy. There were a lot of people in his cabinet who were not Trump. They were not on his side, but they're at least able to explain to you, listen, I either misjudged him, or I didn't quite understand him, or I allowed his personality quirks and his abrasive personality to blind me from the fact that he really is effective. Or at least be honest, Trump is Trump, but the man's a genius and I got to work with him. So I no longer feel the way I used to feel about him. It is what it is. But at least admit, go on record and explain, I used to be his opposition, but now I'm on his side. Now, from a biblical perspective, a person that fails to do that, or is on this side one day and then the next day they flip the script and they provide no explanation, this is what the Bible calls a double-minded man. And a double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways. Like, you have no firm foundation, and you can't tell me that you believe someone is a threat to democracy and then at the same time cozy up for federal dollars and political leverage, unless the whole performance that you were doing before was just for your base, but it had nothing to do with how you really feel. So my question is, which one is it? If Trump is truly a fascist, why are you normalizing him? Isn't that dangerous? Aren't you putting the American people at risk because this individual that you truly believe is a fascist, but now you're normalizing him like, well, we just, we hobnob with fascists every day. Like, if he was really Hitler, would we have ever seen anyone be friends with Hitler? No. And if you really don't believe that, then, I mean, did you lie to your voters for political clout? Like, what was that? Either way, you look crazy. And either way, you've disqualified yourself as a person that we should be taking seriously. But here's the deal. Remember, y'all, Democrats, they are not in the business of telling the truth. They are in the business of emotional manipulation. That is exactly how Zohran Mamdani got elected in the first place. Mamdani fits perfectly into the Democrat ecosystem of mass manipulation. And I'm just curious to see how all of this is going to play out. Now, there's another aspect of this interview where the question of troops being deployed to New York City, he's gonna dodge the question, right? This is where it gets really slippery. Trump is threatening or has threatened to send troops into New York City. Take a look at this clip.
Heard from President Trump to send troops to New York City to address issues of crime and immigration. We've seen him do this in other major cities. Did you get any assurances in your meeting, Mayor-elect Mamdani, that President Trump will not send troops into New York?
I told the president that the cornerstone of an affordability agenda is public safety, and that it is critically important to me. And for all that has been said and all that has been spoken about, and the tens of millions of dollars looking to make New Yorkers fearful of that question, the truth of it is, in fact, that I'm looking forward to working with the NYPD to deliver on that. And I shared with the president that my decision to retain Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch is in large part a recognition of the fact that in her time leading the NYPD, she has driven down crime across the 5 boroughs while starting to uproot corruption that was endemic in the top echelons of that department under Mayor Adams.
And I'm going to follow up with you on your decision to keep Commissioner Tisch. But to this core question that I think so many New Yorkers are curious to know the answer to, what did President Trump say to you? Did he assure you he will not send troops into New York?
He told me that he cared deeply about public safety. I said I cared deeply about the same.
But did he say he wouldn't send troops?
What I told him is that what separates New York City from anywhere else in the country is we have the NYPD. And I trust the NYPD to deliver public safety. And to me, that is something that I know that they can do, that they have done, and they will continue to do under my leadership.
So he didn't rule it out in your meeting?
I made it very clear what we wanted to do was to deliver public safety and affordability, and the NYPD would be the ones to do so.
Now, this is where Kristen Welker asked, did Trump assure you that he wouldn't send the troops? But notice how Mamdani never actually answers the question, and he starts pivoting to the NYPD. He starts talking about public safety and just completely just goes into a discussion about keeping Commissioner Jessica Tisch. Did you catch that? Did y'all see it? Kristen Welker asked him a yes or no question. Did President Trump assure you that he would not send troops into New York City? And what does he do? His answer is basically, I love safety, right? NYPD is great. We kept Commissioner Tisch. We're working on public safety. Y'all, remember, this is the man who he wanted New York City to be a sanctuary city. Matter of fact, take a look at this clip because I know I am not crazy.
We are fighting to keep this city a sanctuary city. We will continue to uphold that status and ensure that we do not allow ICE agents entry into New York City properties, be they schools, hospitals, or even the properties of New York City contractors, unless they can provide a judicial warrant signed by a judge. We will not be accomplices in the attempt to fulfill Donald Trump's promise to create the largest deportation machine this country has ever seen.
Now you heard him. This man made it clear that he didn't want to cooperate with Trump. And I'm just curious to know, why would he not want to help in cracking down on crime if public safety is a concern? But then in the next breath, I thought this was the man that wanted to defund the police. So hear me clearly. I still don't understand how any candidate can win talking crazy and being soft on crime in a city like New York City. The reason why NYPD is struggling to recruit officers as we speak is because of the rhetoric from people like Zohran Mamdani. This man just moved on when Kristen Welker is asking him this question. He just moves on like nothing happened. He never answers the question. We still don't know if Trump is promising no troops. Or we still don't know if he didn't give Mamdani the assurance thereof. We probably will never know until this plays out in real time. But this is classic snake oil rhetoric, okay? Here's what they do. They use safety language. right? Oh, we want Americans to be safe, and this is all about the safety of the American people and the New York City residents. We just want them to be safe. He just uses all of this safety language. Then he wraps it up in emotion. Notice how he never gives a straight answer. Never does. And the reason why I believe he does this is because if he admits that Trump did reassure him, y'all know what's going to happen. His base is going to accuse him of being soft on fascism. And they're going to be like, you don't have a backbone. Now I believe he's already proved that he doesn't have a backbone. But even if he admits that Trump didn't reassure him, then the next thing is he's going to have to explain, why are you smiling in the Oval Office like everything is fine? So instead of truth, we get the typical leftist ambiguity, right? It's just real murky and foggy and you can't see your way through the mess. I'm telling y'all, this is the perfect environment for manipulation. Perfect environment. Now, I want to move on. I have this other clip I want you to see. This is where we go from defund the police to 35,000 police officers is enough, right? So he's going to talk about policing, and this is where the double game or the two-faced game really shows. Take a look at this clip.
All right, let's talk about another major issue, which you referenced, policing.
So many major issues.
Crime. There are a lot of major issues, I know. 5 years ago, you were calling for defunding the police. Now you are in charge of the largest police department in the country. You have tapped Commissioner Jessica Tisch to stay on in her job. She has accepted. She wants to put thousands more police officers on the streets of New York. Will you do that, Mr. Mayor-elect?
I've said over the course of the campaign that I think the number we have had budgeted of 35,000 officers is a sufficient number. What we have to do, however, is allow those officers to focus on policing. And what I mean by that is that in 2020, the response time for the NYPD was less than 11 minutes. Today, it's closer to 16 minutes. A large part of that is because officers are now having to deal with 200,000 mental health calls a year. And so our proposal is create a Department of Community Safety, task it with the mental health crisis, the homelessness crisis, and allow officers to focus on serious crimes so we can get back to the work of delivering on this, as opposed to being trapped in a political discourse without addressing the systemic crisis.
But, you know, violent crime is substantially down under Commissioner Tisch's watch. Do you acknowledge that her approach is working, and therefore do you need to listen to her when she says, I need more cops on the street?
The reason I made the decision to retain Commissioner Tisch is because of the importance of outcomes. The fact that she has been able to deliver on rooting out corruption while lowering crime is something to be celebrated. And I think the commissioner and I have been very clear that what brings us together is a shared importance of public safety. I think we can do that with the officers we have.
Would you rule out putting more police officers on the street?
What I will tell you is that the 35,000 we have budgeted, that's the amount that I think we need.
Okay.
So Zohran goes on record and says that he thinks 35,000 police officers is a sufficient number. And I'm like, bro, just tell us that you need to sound woke enough for the activist crowd. But then you also want to be the mayor who presides over rising crime and total chaos. So I'll split the difference. This is Zohran Mamdani's idea. He's like, I will split the difference and I'll create a Department of Community Safety, right? And I guess that department will handle all of the mental health and homelessness, while he still gets to pretend that he's not expanding the state for all of the people who wanted him to defund the police. So this is what I mean when I say either Zohran knows that his ideology doesn't work, so he has to quietly adjust when reality hits him in the face, or he's planning to preserve the same broken, bloated system, but just rebrand it with progressive language to keep his base happy. Y'all, this is not even about real safety for him. This is the optics of it all. Because if this man truly cared about the safety of his constituents, he would stop using them as props in a social experiment and start backing policies that actually protect people's lives and their property. Now, I want you guys to see how he handles the question about anti-Semitism and protests outside of a Jewish synagogue. Take a look at this clip.
A question that I think was hard for a lot of people to hear about your response to protests outside of a Manhattan synagogue. Your initial response to that incident did receive some criticism, as you know. What is your message to Jewish New Yorkers who feel you won't be tough enough in your response to anti-Semitic incidents?
That I'm looking forward to being the next mayor of New York City and fulfilling the commitment I've made to Jewish New Yorkers over the course of this campaign, which is a commitment to not only protect them across the 5 boroughs, but to celebrate and cherish them. And what that looks like is rooting out anti-Semitism. It looks like increasing funding for hate crime prevention programs by 800%. And it also looks like ensuring that we have NYPD protection outside of synagogues and temples, especially on the high holy days. And I want to just say, recently on Yom Kippur, there was a horrific anti-Semitic attack in Manchester. A rabbi in New York City reached out to me and said, could you ensure that there's additional police protection outside of the synagogue for today? I said, absolutely. And I also asked, what if that rabbi did not know the next mayor of New York City? We have to make it so that it doesn't matter who you know. It matters that you will get that safety and security because you're a New Yorker. That's the administration I'm going to put together.
So in this clip, Mamdani is reassuring the Jewish New Yorkers, and he is promising to protect and celebrate and cherish them. And he vows that an 800% increase in hate crime prevention, and he's going to fund that. Plus, he's going to provide protection outside of these synagogues by the NYPD. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. This is interesting because I don't believe this one bit. I don't. I'm sorry. I don't. Here's why. On the surface, that sounds great. You know, protect the Jewish New Yorkers. Okay, you're going to give them 800% more funding for hate crime prevention. Sounds wonderful. You're going to put NYPD outside of the synagogues. All that sounds great. But here's the part that bothers me. This is the same political class that platformed voices, that slandered Israel, called them colonizers. He tolerates, or what I say, at least soft pedals the pro-Hamas rhetoric in the streets, and then goes and turns around and says, well, don't worry, I'll protect you. That's like the KKK coming to terrorize my community, and then the KKK saying, you know, don't worry, I'll protect y'all from the Indians. Like, this is manufactured chaos. It's manufactured chaos and a way for him to monetize people's compassion. All he's doing is creating the environment that emboldens anti-Semitism and then promise a bigger budget and more programs to fight the very monster that he helped unleash. This is exactly how these, I call them the custodians of chaos. This is how they operate. This is their modus operandi. They are not solving problems. They are actually managing the crisis that they created for political capital. Again, either he truly believes that these soft-on radicalism policies are compatible with Jewish safety, which is completely insane, or he knows, but he's willing to keep the far left coalition intact by talking out of both sides of his mouth. Either way, that's a slithery snake, if I ever met one. Now, he also addresses the $9 billion tax hike, and I thought this part was interesting because his socialist math never maths. So we're going to get into the money because this is where the socialist fantasy really comes out. Take a listen to this clip.
You have said that you want to raise $9 billion in new taxes, increasing taxes on the wealthy, on businesses, in order to fund your key policies like universal child care, which you mentioned. You would need Governor Kathy Hochul to be on board with this. You'd need her signature. She has never publicly committed to increasing taxes. I know you just spoke with her. Mr. Mayor-elect, did Governor Hochul commit to you that she will support and sign on to your plan to increase taxes?
The governor and I had a productive conversation, and what we both committed to is working together for the affordability agenda. And one thing I appreciate of the many about Governor Hochul is that she's been focused not just on affordability, but specifically on universal child care for quite some time. And now is the time to bring a partner forward in City Hall. And I've said plainly and openly that I believe that these are two tax proposals that make sense, increasing the personal income taxes on New Yorkers making $1 million or more by just 2%, increasing the top corporate tax rate to match that of New Jersey. And what I've also said is more important than how we fund something is that we fund something. And if there are additional or alternate revenue streams to do so, I will accept them and I will celebrate them because the most important thing is to actually deliver for the New Yorkers who right now can't even conceive of having a family in New York City because of how expensive we've made childcare across the 5 boroughs.
Well, and your entire agenda is incredibly ambitious: universal child care, free buses, among other things, lowering rent. Can you deliver on this agenda without Governor Hochul agreeing to increase taxes?
Well, I'm thankful that I'm not going to have to engage in the hypothetical, because I am confident of the two of us working together to deliver on this agenda and ensure that finally, and this goes back to just that portrait of FDR, we look at what politics has been in the past. It has been there in the moments of such transformation, meeting the scale of the crisis. We can do that again.
So just yes or no, you think she'll raise taxes?
I think she'll work with me to deliver on affordability. I think raising taxes make the most sense. If there's any alternative that raises the same amount of money, I'm open.
So Welker asked him if he can do his agenda, like can he accomplish this goal without Governor Hochul raising taxes? And Mamdani says that he is confident that they'll work together and dodges any sort of hypothetical situation. He don't want to deal with the hypotheticals. So according to Zohran Mamdani, if you just tax the rich a little more, everything is going to be free. I tell you, these darn Democrats love to steal, don't they? They love, it's always the ones that have no concept of what it means to earn on their own. They always want to take from somebody else. This is the oldest scam in the socialist playbook. It never works out the way that they say it will, ever. Like, do you want to know why it doesn't work? I'll explain. First of all, there's a pattern here. In the socialist playbook, they always promise a utopia. Free childcare, free buses, free everything. You name it, it is free, or so they want you to believe. Then they will demonize the rich, demonize the corporations, and point to them and say, see, that's your enemy right there. It's those rich Republicans and those corporate bigwigs. Those are the big meanies and the bad guys. Then they pass these massive tax hikes. And what the dummies never understand is that the tax hikes don't just hit the rich. They end up impacting jobs. They hit jobs. It hits prices. The small business sector suffers. And then when the math doesn't math, what do? They just circle back. Blame the greedy corporations again. They blame the corporations, and then, well, you know what has to happen now? Now we got to get more money. We have to demand more government control, so you have to vote for us. Because, see, we tried, but then the corporations, right? It's a cycle of just stupidity. This is why I keep saying communism, when you examine the ideals and what communism promises, it offers a stolen version of Christianity. Think about it. Communism borrows the language of justice, which is, we're going to care for the poor and we just want everything to be fair. But instead of discussing repentance, your sin, personal responsibility, the idea of meritocracy, hard work, individual generosity, all of that gets replaced with state control. And then here comes the envy. Here comes the covetousness, all dressed up in compassion. And then Mamdani, he is slick enough to know what he's doing. Oh, he knows. He is not stupid. Well, he might be. Well, put it like this. I'll say this is what he knows. Mamdani knows that New York is already bleeding residents and businesses. Like, he knows that high taxes are driving people to Florida and Texas and even the Carolinas. So either he genuinely believes that New York City can tax and spend its way into flourishing, in which, in this case, his ideals are economically illiterate, or he knows that these policies won't fix anything, but they will at least secure Democrat loyalty from people who have been conditioned to see the government as God. How are you going to slice it? Now, Zohran Mamdani, is he the face of the new Democrat Party? Finally, this is the last clip. I want you guys to hear how Kristen Welker, I want you to hear how she frames him and how he positions himself. Take a look at this clip.
Democratic Party. Mr. Mayor-elect, I wonder, do you think that Democratic Socialists can win across the country, in battleground states, for example?
I think a focus on the importance of dignity for working people is something that appeals to people across this country. I will not venture into the world of national politics and punditry, but what I will tell you is that in New York City, we saw so many of the same dynamics we'd seen elsewhere. We'd seen a shift towards the right. We'd seen obituaries being written about the Democratic Party's ability to speak to young people, to speak to Asian voters, speak especially to young men. And I actually shared this with the president, that the very constituencies that he had won over, that were a critical part of his increased vote share in New York City, were the ones that we then looked at as who we should focus on to bring back into the party. And I think that when you speak to those constituencies with the same respect you'd speak to any other, you will see that they will then engage in the process. We saw an increase in voter turnout amongst 18 to 29-year-olds by more than 300%. And that's because we spoke to them as New Yorkers who are facing an affordability crisis, not as young people we have to finger wag to participate in democracy.
So this is where the mask drops for Zohran. Mamdani is being sold to America as the future of the Democratic Party, right? He's being positioned as, he's going to be the one that can connect the young voters and the Asian voters and the young men. Like, he's the man who can brand socialism as dignity for working people. Y'all, you need to understand what is happening here. The Democratic Party, they know that his policies have wrecked cities. Every smart, if there's a thing, Democrat knows this, right? They already know that their religion of DEI is absolutely collapsing. They're watching it collapse right before their very eyes. And they also know that their identity politics is backfiring. So what are they going to do? Y'all know they don't repent. They never self-correct. They never self-examine and be like, okay, what do we do wrong? And how can we fix this going forward? No, all they do is rebrand. They went and found a young, charismatic, well-spoken socialist who can say, no. This isn't about Marxism. No. This is about dignity. This is about affordability for working people, right? This is about the child care and safety and justice, No. Christians, this is where you cannot be naive. Let me read to you this verse from Proverbs chapter 14, verse 15. Here's what it says. It says, the simple believes everything, but the prudent gives thought to his steps. I was like, dang, that's a good one. Solomon is that dude, okay? You cannot just hear the word dignity and then turn your brain off, right? You can't, if you just hear the word affordability and then you ignore the cost of these policies in real human lives, in lost jobs, destroyed neighborhoods, failing schools, and exploding crime. Mamdani is being positioned as a symbol, but the new diverse for the people face that he's positioning for the party, they still believe in using the state to control every aspect of your life. That is not freedom. This is the party that constantly is offering emotional band-aids while they inflict wounds and pain on you. You cannot fall for the snake oil. Don't fall for the snake oil. So let me land this plane. This video has been long enough. So after watching this full interview, I walked away convinced of a few things. Zohran Mamdani is either a snake oil salesman who will say one thing to voters and another to Trump, or this man is fully aware that his ideas are economically suicidal and socially destructive. But he also knows that these ideas play well on MSNBC or MSNBS now. It works on TikTok. It works on college campuses. And that's enough for Democrats to keep winning elections. So either way, this man is dangerous and he's fraudulent. You can't call a man a fascist and then treat him like he's your funding partner. You cannot call to defund the police and then quietly rely on 35,000 officers to save your city. No, that's not going to work. You can't, in one breath, tolerate anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic rhetoric and then pretend that you're going to just pour money into the hate crime programs, which will make you look like this is some sort of noble leadership. No, you cannot keep promising affordability while you keep raising taxes, growing government and making it bigger, and then strangling the very people who create the jobs. That is not compassion. That is not justice. There's no dignity in any of that. This is what happens when Democrat-sponsored welfarism and socialist fantasies, when those two worldviews collide with political ambition. And as always, the people who end up suffering the most are the very working families that they claim to champion. And I hate the fact that those were the people that actually voted for this clown. So if you live in New York or any big blue city, watching this playbook get imported, I am begging you, do not let this rhetoric replace reality. Pay attention. All of these buzzwords that he's using, you need to examine them against observable reality and history. And if you're a Christian, against what the Bible teaches, right? You can't let your emotions outrun your discernment. We all are hurting right now, but we don't need more charismatic socialists. We need leaders who actually tell the truth, who honor property rights and will defend families and understand that we, the people, are so much more stronger than they, the government. And so, if this episode helped you, if it made you see the political fog that this man has been creating, I need you to do me a favor, hit the like button, share this video with a friend who is either in New York or New York adjacent and who thinks that socialism is the best economic system since sliced bread. But I'm curious to know, what do you think? Do you think Mamdani actually believes his own rhetoric, or is this man just playing a role for power? But whatever it is that you think, leave me a comment down in the description box below. And until next time, you guys, stand firm, stay bold, and above all else, stay unshakable. Grace and